So SOHCAHTOA, it's real important that you know how to spell it. Some of you with spelling issues, if you spell it wrong, you're going to get the formulas wrong, because the formulas are embedded in SOHCAHTOA. If you can't remember SOHCAHTOA, boys for some reason remember some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. And it's like amazing how boys remember that. Like years later, they'll say some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid, okay? So the big S, the big C, and the big T are sine, cosine, and tangent, okay? So the OH, so the big S is sine, the big C is cosine, the big T is tangent. The little O is opposite. The little h is hypotenuse, and the little a is adjacent. And all of these are things that you've heard before about sides of a triangle, right? But these are sides of a right triangle. And if I have a right triangle, and I have this side here is 8 and this side here is 10, I can find this by using the Pythagorean theorem. That's what we did last part of the last class, right? We would do 8 squared plus 10 squared equals x squared, and then you would square root 164 and get the side. But if I have a right triangle and I'm giving you an angle and a side, any side, and I want one of the other sides, we have to use SOHCAHTOA. So this is when we use SOHCAHTOA. So every problem presents itself to you, and you have to figure out, that's a 41 by the way, you have to figure out how to solve the problem, okay? So you are going to circle the angle they give you that is not the right angle. You never use the right angle, ever, ever, ever. You circle this guy. And then you're going to classify the sides of this triangle as opposite that angle, adjacent that angle, or hypotenuse. So you're always going to mark the hypotenuse first, because the hypotenuse could be confused with adjacent because it is touching the angle, but it is the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse never can be anything but the hypotenuse. And then the 16 would be the opposite. So when you look at SOHCAHTOA, you look at a toolbox that's in your garage. And in that toolbox, there's a hammer, a screwdriver, and a pair of pliers. And when you're doing something, you go look at what tool is the best for the job. So we need to find the tool that has an O and an H in it. And that would be so. You see that has an O and an H? All right, so let's see how this works. So it would be sine of the angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. So what would the cosine formula be? It's going to look just the same. Cosine of the angle equals what? What are the two letters next to the C? So it's equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. Decided we're going to use sine for this one. So sine of the angle, who's the angle in this picture? 41 equals 16 over x. And now we just let the math take us there. We're going to cross multiply. Always put the number or letter in front, so x sine of 41 equals 16, and always leave the x alone before you use your calculator. And x is going to be equal to 16 divided by sine of 41. So everybody key that in. You're going to round it to 2 places. The first thing you're going to do is make sure your calculator's in degrees. You're going to hit the mode button and go to degrees. If you run out of charge or battery, it goes back to radians. So if you start seeing answers that just don't seem right, check your mode. Make sure you're in degrees. A lot of kids will come up to me and go, I'm not getting the same answer as my neighbor, And that's the first thing I check is the mode. So if you can do that, that would eliminate some issues. Okay, so what is 16 divided by sine of 41? So this side here is 24.39. And that makes sense because the hypotenuse is the biggest triangle, the biggest side of a triangle, and it's got to be bigger than 16. But it can't be like 400, right? Because you wouldn't be able to make a triangle with a 16 and a 400 side. So that makes sense that it's about that size, okay? First thing you're going to do is classify these sides. What is the x? Is the x adjacent, hypotenuse, or opposite? It is the adjacent, and the 14 is the hypotenuse. So here we do SOHCAHTOA. And on the top of my paper, I always write SOHCAHTOA so that I can have it right there, have my formula sheet right there for me. And this needs an A, an A and an H. So we're using the cosine. Everybody understand that? Yes. So we're using the A and the H. So it's going to be cosine of the angle equals A over H. And this would be x equals 14 cosine of 23. Make sure that 23 is alone. Like, don't put the 14 after the 23 or you're going to get the wrong answer. And you should get your answer. 14 cosine of 23 is 12.89. Everybody get that? Does that make sense? It's a little bit smaller than the 14, which is good because the 14's got to be the biggest guy. So the x is what? Adjacent. And the 13? Opposite. So this is TOA, tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. Do you understand why the order is that way? Because the O is first and the A is second. And then you'll have x tangent of 34 equals 13. And divide by tangent of 34. And you get 13 divided by tangent of 34.
How do you know when to divide or when to multiply?
You just let the math take you there. 19.27. So number 4, you use sine because you have the opposite and the hypotenuse, and it's sine of 37 equals opposite, which is x, over hypotenuse, which is 18, and you cross multiply, and you get that x equals 18 sine of 37, which is 10 point what?
Oh, okay.
10.83.
I got 29.9.